The storage unit smelled like damp cardboard and something older. Maybe the particular sadness of things people couldn't bring themselves to throw away but couldn't stand to look at either. My mother had kept everything here after she sold the house. Boxes labelled in her handwriting, furniture draped in old bed sheets, a lifetime packed into a 10 by 10 room. I was supposed to be finding her Medicare paperwork. Instead, I found the deed. Not just any deed, the deed to the bakery, the one with both our names on it, mine and my brother's, along with a handwritten note from my mother tucked inside the folder. The note said, "In equal parts, neither one without the other." I stood there in the fluorescent light with that paper in my hand for a long time, because my brother had told me, 6 months ago, right after my mother's stroke, when she still couldn't speak clearly, and I was still sleeping 3 hours a night at the hospital, he had told me that she'd changed the ownership, that she'd wanted him to run things, that I was of course still family, and always welcome, but that the legal structure had been updated. I had believed him. I was so tired. I was so scared we were going to lose her. And he was standing right there, calm and certain, wearing our father's old watch on his wrist. And I believed him. That was my first mistake. You have to understand what the bakery meant to us to understand what he took. My mother came to the United States from the Philippines when she was 22 with $200 and a recipe notebook her own mother had pressed into her hands at the airport. She didn't speak much English. She didn't know anyone in Columbus, Ohio. She got a job at a hotel doing housekeeping, and she saved and she learned. And by the time I was born, she had already started selling pan de sal out of a cooler at the Filipino community church on Sunday mornings. By the time I was 8, she had the storefront on Morse Road. It was never fancy. Laminate countertops, a display case with a slight wobble on one leg, a back kitchen that got so hot in July that we kept a box fan running even when the health inspector came. But it was hers. She worked 6 days a week for 20 years to build it from a cooler full of bread into something that had a line out the door on weekends, a catering account with 3 local hospitals, and a name that people in our neighbourhood knew. My brother and I grew up in that bakery. Homework on the flour-dusted prep table. Saturday mornings restocking the pastry case before school dances. First jobs, both of us, ringing up customers and learning how to smile through the sore feet. When I was in my mid-20s, after my mother's knee started giving her trouble and my father had already been gone 6 years, she sat us both down and said she wanted to bring us in as co-owners. Equal shares. Her retirement plan was to step back slowly, let us run things, and trust that we would take care of each other the way she had always taken care of us. My brother Theo, I'm sorry, I need to stop. His name isn't something I'll use here. I'll just call him what he became to me, a stranger who wore my brother's face. He said yes. He smiled. He hugged her. Then he waited. The stroke happened on a Tuesday in March. I was at work. I had a separate job managing accounts for a small property company, which my mother had always insisted on, saying she didn't want us to put all our eggs in one basket. My brother had come back to Columbus 2 years before, after a failed restaurant venture in Nashville that he never talked about in detail, but that had clearly cost him more than money. He moved back into Mom's house. He said it was to help her. I thought it was good. I thought we were lucky that someone could be there with her. I understand now what he was doing. He was positioning. When she had the stroke, I drove straight to the hospital and didn't leave for 4 days. He was there too, and we took turns sitting with her, and in those first blurry weeks I genuinely thought we were going through it together. He bought coffee. He spoke to the doctors. He handled the insurance calls when I was too exhausted to hold a phone. It was 3 weeks in when she had been moved to a rehabilitation facility and her speech was coming back in fragments when he sat me down in the hospital cafeteria and told me about the update. He said she had talked to him about it before the stroke, that she felt I already had my own income, my own stability, and that he needed the security of full ownership to really commit to the business, that she had wanted him to be the one in charge, that this was what she wanted. He showed me a document. It looks official. It had what looked like her signature on it. I want to say I demanded a lawyer right then. I want to say I was smart enough, fierce enough, awake enough to know something was wrong. I wasn't. I was 31 years old, and my mother couldn't finish her sentences yet, and I was holding everything together with tape and caffeine and the particular determination of someone who just needs things to not fall apart for 5 more minutes. I nodded. I said, okay. I went back upstairs to sit with her. I didn't look at that document closely enough. That was my second mistake. What followed was 6 months of being slowly, methodically, politely shut out. First, it was the bank account. He said he was streamlining the business finances, and could I hand over the access I had to the bakery's operating account? Just for now, just while things were in transition. I handed it over. Then it was the supplier contracts. He was renegotiating. Could he take point on that? Sure. Then the staff scheduling. Then the catering accounts. Then the social media passwords, because he wanted a consistent voice, each one a small, reasonable-sounding request. Each one another door closing behind me. I still came in. I still helped on weekends when it was busy. I told myself it was temporary, that once Mom was more stable we would figure out the actual structure. I told myself I was being a good daughter by not making everything harder during a hard time. Meanwhile, my mother was getting better. Slower than anyone wanted, but steadily. Her speech therapist said she was making excellent progress. By late summer she could hold a full conversation, could read, could sign her name. It was around that time that I got a call from Deborah. Deborah had been my mother's bookkeeper for 11 years. She was 60-something, meticulous, and she had a voice like she was always on the verge of giving you disappointing news. I'm calling because I resigned, she said. I want you to know that. I resigned because I wasn't comfortable with what I was being asked to do. I asked her what she meant. She paused. There's a college savings account your mother set up for your daughter. Has been for years. Your mother never said anything to you about closing it. My daughter Inez was 7. My mother had started that account when she was born. Put a few $100s in every month. Quietly, stubbornly, the way she did everything. She told me once it was her way of making sure Inez had options. That no one could take options away from her. Closing it, I repeated. The funds were transferred out about 2 months ago, Deborah said, into the business operating account, roughly $40,000. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I'm not sure when I decided to sit down. I was just on the floor. $40,000. My mother had been building that for 7 years. She had never missed a month, even during COVID, even when the bakery nearly went under, and she and I worked the counter alone for 6 months because we couldn't afford to keep the full staff. $40,000 that was supposed to be Inez's. He told me it was authorized, Deborah said. He had a document, but I've known your mother a long time, and something didn't sit right. I'm sorry I didn't call sooner. I thanked her. I hung up. I looked at my daughter's drawings stuck to the refrigerator with fruit magnets, and I felt something shift inside me that I don't have a clean word for. Not just anger. Anger would have been simpler. It was the particular feeling of understanding all at once how long I had been naive. I called a lawyer the next morning, an attorney named Catherine Webb, who a colleague had recommended, and who turned out to be exactly the kind of person you want across a table from you when you've been wronged, quiet, precise, and unhurried. I bought her everything I could find, the deed from the storage unit, which I had carefully photographed and then returned exactly where I found it, not wanting him to know I'd seen it. Bank statements I still had access to from an old account linked to my email, emails between my mother and the original co-ownership attorney from 3 years ago, and a letter my mother had written to me, handwritten, never sent, tucked in a birthday card envelope in her bedside drawer that she'd asked me to bring her when she moved into the rehab facility, and I'd quietly read while she was sleeping. The letter wasn't about any of this. It was just a letter. She wrote about how proud she was of me, about how she hoped I knew my value, about how the bakery was supposed to be something we built together, all of us, neither one without the other, she had written, the same words as the deed. I gave Catherine a copy of the letter. She looked at it for a long time. Okay, she said, let's start with the signature. It took a forensic document examiner 12 days to deliver her report. The signature on the updated ownership document my brother had shown me, the one I'd nodded at in the hospital cafeteria, too tired to fight, was not my mother's. It was a forgery. Not a terrible forgery. Whoever did it had practiced, had paid attention to the loop in her capital letters and the way she always pressed harder with a pen at the end of a word. But it wasn't hers. The pressure patterns were wrong. The ink distribution was wrong. And my mother, who had signed her name on 1,000 contracts and receipts and school permission slips, had a slight rightward tilt that this signature didn't have. Catherine also found that the transfer of Inez's college account had been done using a limited power of attorney document that my brother had apparently had prepared while my mother was at the rehabilitation facility, during a window when she was on a medication that affected her cognition and would have made her highly susceptible to suggestion. The notary who witnessed it had since been flagged in 2 other cases in Franklin County for irregularities. It was not a small thing. It was a criminal thing. Catherine called me on a Thursday afternoon to tell me all of this. I was parked in the pickup line at Inez's school, watching second graders in backpacks pour out through the double doors. "What do I do now?" I asked. "You let me make some calls," she said, "and you don't say anything to your brother yet." I watched Inez spot my car and start running toward it, her backpack bouncing. She had my mother's eyes. "Okay," I said, "not yet." The conversation with my mother was the hardest part. She had moved back home by then, with a part-time maid and the kind of stubborn progress that her doctors called remarkable and that I called her just being herself. She was slower than before and tired more easily, but she was there. Fully herself, behind the eyes. I told her on a Sunday afternoon, when the aide had gone home and Inez was at a neighbour's house. I sat at her kitchen table with the copies Catherine had given me, and I walked my mother through it. She didn't cry. I had expected her to cry. Instead, she went very still in the way she sometimes did when she was processing something that required the full weight of her attention. When I finished, she reached across the table and touched the photocopy of the deed, the one with both our names, the one with her handwriting. "I wrote that note," she said quietly. "I know. I never changed it." A pause. "He told me you didn't want it. After the stroke, he told me you had said you wanted to step back, that you had your own career and it was too much." I hadn't said that. I had never said anything like that. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Get Catherine back on the phone." My brother did not take it well when Catherine's letter arrived. There were calls to me, to my mother, to an uncle in Sacramento who had nothing to do with any of this but who apparently got along, rambling voicemail about how I was destroying the family. There were texts to me at 2 in the morning that I screenshotted and forwarded to Catherine without responding to. There was one phone call where he cried and said he had only done it because he was scared, that the Nashville failure had left him with nothing, that he had genuinely believed Mom wanted him to have the business, that he had just moved some money around to keep things stable, that I was making it into something it wasn't. I listened. I let him finish. Then I said, "You forged her signature. You took $40,000 that was for my daughter's education. And you told our mother that I wanted to step away from the bakery we grew up in." He said, "I know." I had not expected that. "I know," he said again. "I know what I did." The silence on the phone was heavy enough to sit in. "Then you know what comes next," I said. What came next took 8 months. The forgery charge was referred to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. The power of attorney used to access Inez's account was declared invalid. Because of the documented concerns about cognitive influence at the time of signing, the transfer was legally reversed. The $40,000 plus interest was returned to a new account, one that only my name and my mother's name were on. The bakery ownership was restored to the deed's original terms, my mother, myself, and my brother as co-owners. He did not contest this, which Catherine said was the one smart decision he made throughout the whole process. He received 2 years of probation, a fine, mandatory financial counseling, and a prohibition from managing any business finances for 5 years. He did not go to prison. My mother asked Catherine if there was any way to keep him out of prison, and Catherine said there might be, and there was. I don't know how I feel about that. I think I don't feel one single way about it. I think there are about 11 feelings stacked on top of each other, and some days one is on top, and some days another is. And I've stopped trying to sort them into something neat. He's not involved in the bakery anymore. He's living in an apartment 20 minutes away, and I see him at family dinners when I choose to go, which is sometimes, and not always. My mother calls him on Sundays. That is between them. I run the bakery now, full time. I left my property management job in February, which felt like jumping off a cliff and turned out to feel, once I landed, like something I should have done years ago. We kept Deborah's replacement, a younger woman named Christine, who is organised in a way that makes me feel vaguely ashamed of my own filing system. We updated the display case. We finally fixed the wobble on the leg. Inez turns 8 next month. She has started asking if she can help on Saturdays, the way my brother and I used to, and my mother watches her restock the pastry case with an expression I don't have a word for in English, but that I think might be the visual equivalent of "this is what I work for." The other day I found a recipe notebook, the one my grandmother had pressed into my mother's hands at the airport in 1987. It had been in a box in the storage unit this whole time, tucked behind the Medicare paperwork I'd originally gone in to find. I brought it home and set it on the prep table in the back kitchen, under the box fan, next to Inez's school backpack. My mother used to say that a recipe is just a promise you make in advance, that if you do these things in this order, something good will come of it. I'm starting to think she was right about more than baking. I keep thinking about the storage unit, the smell of damp cardboard, the single window, the box I almost didn't open. If I had grabbed the Medicare folder and left, if I had been in more of a hurry that day, I might never have found the deed. I might still be telling myself that things would sort themselves out eventually, that my brother was just going through something, that family doesn't really do that to family. But they do. And the thing I've had to sit with, the thing that took me the longest to admit, is that I made it easier for him. Not because I was weak, because I was tired and grieving and I trusted the wrong person at the wrong time. That's not the same thing as being at fault, but it's not nothing either. I handed over account access one small request at a time, and I told myself each time that it was temporary, that it was fine, that I was being the bigger person. What I was being the bigger person. What I was actually doing was closing my own doors. My mother built something over 20 years from almost nothing, from a cooler and a recipe notebook and $200, and the particular stubbornness of someone who has no option but to keep going. She did that through a kind of integrity that I watched my whole childhood without fully understanding. She never cut corners on the ingredients even when money was tight. She paid her staff on time even when it hurt. She told the truth to people even when a comfortable lie would have been easier. I thought that was just her personality. I understand now that it was a choice she made over and over for decades. A choice about what kind of person she wanted to be when things got hard. What my brother chose, when things got hard for him, was a different path. And the evidence of that choice followed him. Forensic reports don't lie. Bank records don't lie. A notary flagged in 2 separate cases doesn't lie. The thing about trying to build your life on documents you fabricated is that documents can be examined. The truth was always there underneath. It just needed someone patient enough to look. I'm not the same person I was the morning I sat down on my kitchen floor after Deborah called me. Something changed that day. Not broke, changed. I stopped waiting to feel ready to fight. I stopped hoping it would resolve itself without me having to be the one to do something uncomfortable. I found an attorney. I asked questions I should have asked months earlier. I showed up to every meeting, even the ones where the news was hard, and I took notes, and I kept going. Inez is going to grow up knowing that her college fund is there. She's also going to grow up watching her mother run the bakery that her grandmother built. I don't know which one of those things will matter more to her when she's older, but I know what I want her to see when she looks at how I handled this. That you can be patient and still be fierce. That you can love someone and still hold them accountable. That the most important thing you can do when someone takes something from you is not to fall apart. It's to find the paper trail and know what you're looking at. My mother used to say that a recipe is a promise you make in advance. I think the same is true of the choices you make about your own character. You practice them in the small moments, the unremarkable Tuesdays, long before the moment when it actually counts. And when that moment comes, and it will come, in one shape or another, for all of us, what you find is whatever you've been quietly building all along.